Your support matters, with 90% of our viewers yet to subscribe. We need your help to keep creating engaging content. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let us know where you're watching from. Leave your city in the comments below. It's strange how silence can feel deafening when your world is unraveling. I sat alone in the dim glow of my office, like the rest of the building, dark and deserted. After hours, my heels had long been kicked off under the desk, and my once straight blouse was wrinkled from a day that felt like it never really started. In front of me sat a photograph, our family taken years ago on a beach in Santa Monica. My husband Daniel stood tall with that signature smirk of his arm around my waist. I stood there smiling, holding our youngest daughter, while our older two played in the background. Back then I thought I had everything, but over the years, cracks began to surface, slowly, subtly. Not in loud arguments or slamming doors, but in the quiet spaces. Between words, the fading eye contact, the rehearsed I love yous. And now on this Friday evening, the photograph seemed more like a memory of strangers than a portrait of a family. Daniel was the regional director for a pharmaceutical logistics firm. The kind of man who didn't just walk into a room, he owned it. He wasn't overtly cruel. No bruises or shouting matches, just cold measured control that made you feel small without understanding how or when it started. And me, I was just Celeste, his wife of 19 years, his shadow. I used to think we were partners, that we grew together, that raising 3 children and sharing one roof meant something. But somewhere along the way, I became a prop in his meticulously arranged life. I watched him slowly trade warmth for calculation. He could manipulate situations with the precision of a chess master. Not to win. No winning was too easy for him. He played for power, for the pleasure of pulling strings. He wasn't always like this. Years ago, he was kind, funny, curious about the world. We'd stay up late watching documentaries and eating microwave popcorn. He used to run his fingers through my hair and whisper about growing old together. But power does things to people. When Daniel got promoted, something changed. He didn't just manage people. He studied them like puzzles, to be solved, twisted, and controlled. And I faded. The past few months had been worse. Every Thursday he traveled to meet with various sales teams across states. He insisted it was essential that his presence ensured productivity. I never argued. In fact, I welcomed it. Thursdays became my own little pocket of freedom. My girls' nights, the only night I could breathe without his eyes on me. But that Friday night, something had shifted. He came home later than usual. I was in the kitchen sipping tea, wearing a silk blouse I hadn't put on for him in years. Not because I was waiting, just because I liked the way it felt against my skin. When he walked in, he paused at the doorway scanning me, the way he might study a client. He intended to manipulate interviews. Go well, I asked, not bothering to mask my boredom. Scheduled for Monday. Everything's lined up, he replied with a hollow smile. There was always something about him that unnerved me, especially when he looked calm. It was never true. Calm. It was calculation. I didn't ask anything more. I didn't care. We made small talk, sat through a quiet dinner, then pretended to watch television until bedtime. We had perfected the art of being strangers, but it was on our weekend family trip 2 weeks ago, when things truly started to unravel. We'd gone to Nashville, his idea of normally, I suppose. We visited the Grand Ole Opry and took staged photos. On the drive back, we stopped at a place called Lambert's, famous for flinging hot dinner rolls across the restaurant. The kids laughed like it was the most magical thing they'd ever seen. I smiled for them, for appearances. Daniel didn't laugh. He barely spoke. On the drive home, I turned off the music I had to know. Maybe I was reckless. Maybe I was fed up with the silence. Daniel, I said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Have you ever thought about cheating? I expected denial, maybe anger. But he was still for a moment too long before he responded. Why do you ask? Because I wonder sometimes if stepping outside the marriage might help clear the fog. We live like co-workers with a shared mortgage. Maybe something radical could wake us up. He didn't flinch. He turned, slightly looked at me, like I was a suspect in one of his mental games. That's an odd thing to suggest, he said calmly. Is there something you want to admit? I shook my head. I didn't. But maybe I wanted him to feel what I had been feeling. Uncertainty, loneliness, suspicion. I'm just saying, maybe we need to redefine what fidelity means. It's not the 1950s anymore. He paused again and his next words chilled me. If that's something you truly feel you need, then do it. You have my blessing. I glanced at him. That smirk again. He wasn't offended. He wasn't shocked. He was expecting it. We rode in silence for over an hour. He didn't reach for my hand. I didn't offer it. I knew something deeper had shifted. He wasn't just prepared for infidelity. He was orchestrating something. By the time we got home, my heart was pounding for a different reason. My children rushed to greet us, their faces beaming, oblivious to the tension we carried in our silence. I kissed them all goodnight and excused myself to bed early. The next morning, everything collapsed. Daniel left the house early, claiming he needed to help his father with a project. I didn't believe it. His father barely trusted him with a screwdriver, let alone a repair job. But I played along. That's what I'd been trained to do. By noon, my phone buzzed. It was from his mother. We need to talk urgently. It's about April. April, our youngest. Our curious, bright, 2 eyes for her years, daughter. My heart stuttered. I called back immediately. Celeste, she said, her voice shaking. Please don't panic. But you know those genealogy kits we ordered as a joke last Christmas? Yes. We submitted one for April, just for fun. I froze. There's a woman who matched as a close relative, claims to be April's grandmother, but not from your side, or Daniel's. I swallowed. That can't be right, she says her son. Adrian is April's biological father. Celeste isn't Adrian, your boss. I sat down. The floor might as well have opened under me. Adrian, district attorney, respected, powerful. And yes, the man I once made the mistake of turning to when Daniel was away. Too much. It wasn't an affair, not in the physical sense, but there was a connection, emotional, forbidden, brief, but never consummated. Not that I remembered. My body went cold. She must be mistaken, I whispered. But the DNA wasn't lying, and neither was the chaos that was coming. I spent the rest of that Thursday night sitting in my car, watching the dark outline of Adrian Barrow's house through the windshield. The neighborhood was quiet. The occasional flicker of lights through curtains, or the slow hum of a car passing by, was all that reminded me the world was still moving. But for me, time had slowed. My hands gripped the steering wheel like a vice, my knuckles pale against the black leather. Inside that house, my wife, the mother of my children, was laughing, drinking, touching another man. And not just any man, but her boss, a man I had shared handshakes and small talk with over the years. A man who had no idea. I now held the strings. At around 1:30 in the morning, the lights finally dimmed. I waited another hour before driving off, careful not to attract attention. By the time I reached home, I moved silently through the house, passing the hallway where our wedding photo still hung. I stared at it for a moment. The glossy print had faded with time, but our smiles were as wide and perfect as ever. almost too perfect, like everything else she curated in our lives. I wanted to rip it from the wall, but instead I walked past it and went to bed. Celeste came home the next morning around 6:45, her hair slightly undone, her voice chipper, as she claimed she'd stayed the night with her old college roommate, who had just moved back to town. I nodded, sipping coffee. I didn't challenge the lie, not yet. It was too early for confrontation. I needed the full picture, and when I made my move, it would leave no room for doubt. The next few weeks, my routine changed. I stopped needing excuses. David handled the regional visits, and I used Cheryl's beat. I tore us to shadow Celeste every Thursday night. Every time the same pattern unfolded. Dinner with Adrian, drive to his house, the same key code, the same casual betrayal. It was almost comical, the predictability of it all. Celeste, who once lectured me about emotional integrity, who prided herself on her composure, had become a cliche in her own affair. But what she didn't realize was that I had turned her little secret into my stage. Every meeting was documented. Every kiss, every word. Cheryl's husband, a quiet tech-savvy guy who rarely spoke unless it involved wires or screens, had rigged up the surveillance equipment so well, even the neighbors wouldn't have noticed. I started organizing the evidence, edited clips, transcripts, locations, dates. My assistant, discreet, loyal and sharp, helped me index everything. She never asked questions. I suspect she had seen enough over the years to stop being surprised by anything. One afternoon, as I was reviewing footage, Kathy walked in with a troubled expression. She hesitated in the doorway, holding a file in her hands. "Sir, there's something you should see." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." She stepped closer and placed a printed email on my desk. It was a forwarded message from an anonymous source. The subject line read, "You deserve to know the truth." The email contained a string of photos, old ones clearly scanned from physical prints. One showed Celeste and Adrian at a Christmas party, long before we were married. She was seated on his lap, both of them red-faced with alcohol and laughter. Another showed them kissing behind a curtain at some formal event. The timestamps, although partially blurred, dated back to a year before we had even met. I leaned back in my chair, so it hadn't started recently. Celeste and Adrian had history, deep, tangled history. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, long after the house fell silent, thinking of every conversation Celeste and I had over the years. Every smile, every intimate moment. Had it all been built on lies? Or had she at some point genuinely tried to move on, only to fall back into his orbit? I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't care. What mattered now was how I played my hand. On Sunday morning, as Celeste was prepping for her weekly brunch with her sisters, I walked into the back kitchen with a calm, practiced air. I leaned on the counter and watched her spread cream cheese over a bagel. "Thinking of changing careers?" I said casually. She paused, the knife hovering mid-air. "Really?" "Yeah, I've been wondering what it would be like to work in law enforcement. Maybe the DA's office." She gave a short laugh. "You're kidding." I tilted my head. "Why not? I hear there are a lot of ethical people there. Hard work, loyal." She stiffened just slightly, a flicker in her eyes. "Are you trying to say something, Ed?" I smiled. "Not at all, just making conversation." She left an hour later, but not before checking her reflection twice and changing her earrings. It was subtle, but I noticed she was nervous. After she left, I called Cheryl. "It's time," I said. We arranged the next phase. Adrian was scheduled to speak at a community event, a local fundraiser, to promote juvenile rehabilitation programs. Of all things, Cheryl knew one of the coordinators and had secured me a backstage access pass under a fake name. I wasn't going to confront him publicly. That would be messy and unproductive. But I wanted to observe him in his element, to see how he worked a crowd, how he looked into the eyes of strangers and spoke of justice, fairness, redemption, all while lying through his teeth. The event was attended parents, teachers, local officials. Adrian took the stage with his signature charisma, dressed in a sharp suit, his voice steady and confident. I stood behind the curtains, arms folded, watching. After his speech, as the crowd clapped politely, I turned and slipped away, unnoticed. I'd seen enough. The man was a performer, just like Celeste. Back at the office, I printed the latest financial statements from our joint accounts. Celeste had recently moved some money. Not a lot, but enough to raise. An eyebrow, I flagged it. I also found several gift purchases, designer scarves, an expensive watch, 2 bottles of vintage wine, all paid for with a secondary credit card she never told me about. She was preparing for something, maybe an exit, maybe a confrontation. Either way, she had no idea how far ahead I was. The following Thursday, I didn't follow her. I had something else in mind. Instead, I called Adrian. He answered with his usual smooth voice, clearly not recognizing my number. "Mr. Barrow," I said. "It's Julian Adams. I believe we share a few personal interests." There was a pause, then a cautious, "What can I do for you, Mr. Adams?" I kept my tone light. "I'd like to talk in person. Just a quick conversation. Neutral ground. No drama." He hesitated, then agreed. We arranged to meet at a quiet bar on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where people went to disappear. I arrived early, ordered water, and waited. When Adrian walked in, he looked composed, but when he saw me, that composure faltered just a little, enough to confirm everything. I gestured to the seat across from me. "Relax," I said. "This isn't an ambush." He sat down, folding his hands on the table. "You've got my attention." "I know about you and Celeste," I said plainly. "I know about the Thursday nights, the trips, the past, and I know about April." His mouth opened, then closed. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "You've been with her for years," I continued. "Maybe even before me, but you kept her on a leash. A quiet little affair tucked into the shadows. And now she's decided she wants something more. But here's the thing. I don't care about your feelings. I care about control." He leaned back, eyes narrow. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm giving you a choice." I pulled out a small folder and slid it across. "She loses everything. Custody, the house, public image." He didn't open the folder. He didn't have to. He knew what it meant. "So what do you want?" he asked. Voice low, I smiled. "For now, nothing. Just stay out of my way, and when I'm ready, you'll know." I stood up and walked out, leaving him there with his hands still folded, the folder untouched. The air outside felt clearer, cooler, the kind of air that came right before a storm. And I was ready to bring one. Celeste still had no idea what was coming, but the pieces were in motion. All I had to do was wait and then strike. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. Celeste continued her routine, oblivious to the storm, forming just outside her carefully crafted world. She kissed me goodbye in the mornings, made dinner a few times a week, even suggested a weekend getaway to reconnect. I played along, nodding when necessary, smiling when appropriate, and letting her believe the illusion she was living in was still intact. But I was already gone emotionally, mentally. I had left weeks ago. It was strange in a way, watching her lie so convincingly, so effortlessly, while knowing I held every detail of her secret life in the palm of my hand. She didn't know that I had copies of every receipt, every hotel reservation, every whispered confession between her and Adrian. She didn't know that her phone calls had been recorded, that her movements had been tracked with precision. She didn't know that I was no longer angry. I was calm, cold, ready, one evening after the kids were asleep, and Celeste was folding laundry in our bedroom. I sat across from her, watching her fingers move. Have you ever thought about what it would take to lose everything? I asked. She looked up, confused. What do you mean everything? The house, the family, your career, reputation. She gave a nervous laugh. That's a bit dramatic. Don't you think? I didn't answer. I just kept my eyes on her until she looked away. I could see it then, the first real crack in her confidence. 2 days later, I made an appointment with my lawyer, a calm, steady man named Thomas, who had handled my business contracts for years. When I laid out the situation, he blinked slowly and asked me one question. Do you want this to destroy her? Or do you want to walk away with everything? I paused. Both. He gave a slow nod. Then we'll move carefully. The plan was simple. Celeste wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. First, we separated our accounts quietly. The house was already in my name, something she had never questioned. Because in her words, I trust you. Ironic considering I made sure to protect all the assets that mattered. My business, the savings, the investments, the college funds. Then came the evidence package. I sent it to Adrian, not Celeste. It arrived in a manila envelope on his desk. One morning inside was everything. The photos, the call logs, a list of every Thursday night rendezvous. But more than that, there were 2 documents attached. One was a statement confirming his relationship with Celeste to be signed and notarized. The other was a mutual non-disclosure agreement, ensuring that if he cooperated, the information wouldn't go public. I gave him 72 hours. He responded within 24, signed everything, sent it back with no objections. He knew the cost. After that, it was just a matter of time. On a warm Thursday afternoon, Celeste came home early. I was in the kitchen sipping tea when she walked in. Her face was pale. She didn't greet me, just stood in the doorway, with her purse still on her shoulder. You went to Adrian, she said. I set my cup down. Yes. Her voice shook. Why? You already know the answer. She stepped closer. Eyes wild. What do you want from me, Julian? Do you want to scream, throw things? What, just do it already? I shook my head. I'm past that, Celeste. I don't want revenge. I want clarity, honesty. She scoffed. Now you want honesty? I stood. Yes, I want to know when it started. Before we were married. During, did it ever stop? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally, she whispered. It started before you and I met, but I ended it for a while. Then we ran into each other again after the promotion. Things just happened. You mean you let them happen? She flinched. I gave you everything, I said. Built a life for us, trusted you. I didn't plan this, she whispered. No, I said. You just lied every week and hoped I was too blind to notice silence stretched between us. What now? She finally asked. I walked past her and placed an envelope on the counter. Divorce papers. I already signed them. You can have your lawyer look it over, but you won't be getting the house or the kids. I've already filed for full custody. Her face crumpled. You can't do that. I can, I said quietly. And I will. She sank into a chair, hands shaking. I'm sorry, she said almost inaudibly. I didn't mean to fall back into it. I didn't know how to stop. I looked at her for a long time. The woman I had loved. The woman I had built a future with. The woman who had chosen someone else. Over and over again. You had so many chances to stop, I said, but you didn't want to. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. Later that night after, she left to stay at her sister's. I sat in the quiet of the house. Our house, the children were asleep. Their lives I hoped would be untouched by the chaos we'd hidden from them. I walked through the rooms, the living room with its carefully chosen decor, the kitchen where we'd once laughed over burnt pancakes, the hallway lined with family photos. It all felt like a museum now, a display of what used to be. I wasn't broken, not anymore. I was free. Weeks passed. The divorce moved forward without resistance. Celeste didn't fight for the house. She didn't fight for custody. Adrian predictably cut off contact with her, whether out of guilt or fear. I didn't care. He stepped down from his public position a month later, citing personal reasons. It was in the local paper, but buried beneath more pressing news. Celeste moved into a small apartment across town. She saw the kids on weekends. She tried to be involved. I didn't stop her, but things were different now. She had betrayed more than a marriage. She had betrayed a life. And some things can't be rebuilt once broken. I focused on healing, on being present, on creating a life that no longer depended on anyone else's approval. People asked questions. Neighbors, friends. I never gave details. I didn't need to. The truth had already done its work. And in the end, that was enough. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need public humiliation. All I needed was the truth and the strength to walk away from a woman who had never truly been mine. And now finally, I had both.